Earful Tower listeners, episode 3 already.
Did you stumble?
Yeah, I forgot what episode number we're up to.
It's going so fast.
So this is we've got a bit of a different episode this time, and I'm going to start it with some fan mail that we got.
Oh,
Remember we used to get
we did.
Yeah,
we did.
it
We
dried
did.
up.
Do you remember that section? Fan mail. You got mail.
Yeah,
Yeah. What happened to
we
that?
only had one fan mail, so the section
I
after.
think we scrapped it after that.
Well, let me read to you some fan mail that I got, and I'm going to tell everybody at home what this episode's going to be about because they're connected. So, hi. My name is Colby Fox, and I live in New Orleans. I came across your podcast after I was given the chance to come to Paris later this month. I really enjoyed listening to all your episodes. I feel like it's being made just for me. Your podcast has given me many interesting insights and about how I can make my most of my time in Paris.
That's good. You're useful.
Yeah, we're useful.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, this guy, he says it
Do you
feels...
think there are any other people who are going to try and go around on a scooter trying to visit the whole of Paris?
Well, it's funny that you say that, actually, because that's about to come up again, too.
Oh.
James is, of course, referring to episode 25 of last season when we tried to go around the entire...
Season finale.
It was
we
a failure.
failed terribly.
Yeah, listen to that one if you want to hear what failure sounds like on the back of a scooter. Anyway, I said to Colby, it'd be interesting that you feel that the episodes are being made all for you. Why don't you tell me who your ideal guest would be? James is opening some candy. I said, yeah, I will. Thanks. I said, tell me who your ideal guest would be for a future episode and tell me what your ideal topic would be. And he said, I'd love to hear an episode with John Baxter.
Who's John Baxter?
The author John Baxter.
John Baxter. He's from your neck of the woods,
Exactly
isn't he?
right. Yeah, he's written loads of books about Paris. And he said, Colby said that his top kind of episode would be about being a flaneur, someone who walks around the city. And I thought, why don't we organize a little bit of a surprise? This is all when you were out of town, by the way, James.
I had no idea all this was going on.
So I messaged Colby and I said, hey, why don't you come in and sit on the studio? We've had some people that sit on episodes before, and
People just queue up to come and
yeah. Well, we said, come in and sit behind an episode, and I'll even ask you a question or two about being a flaneur, maybe, because he's walking around Paris. Little did he know, as you're about to hear, that after a few minutes of conversation...
Wait, you're ruining the surprise for everyone.
Yeah, but people are going to hear it. I had a surprise guest at the door, and seeing James is concerned I'm going to give away the surprise. I'm not going to tell you who it was.
Who could it have been?
But maybe it was John Baxter. Anyway, here's what happened when everybody met up during the summer.
It was all so beautiful.
It was lovely. So you're listening to an episode about flaneur with maybe a special guest.
And a spooky story at the end.
Of course, as usual,
Story with Corey.
every single episode ends with a story from Corey the tour guide. Stay tuned for that at the end, and happy listening.
Earful Tower with Oliver G.
So Colby Fox, a tourist in Paris.
I am, yeah.
Welcome to the studio.
I'm happy to be here.
You're the first listener that's become a guest.
That's,
We've had guests that have become listeners, but you're a listener that's become a guest.
yeah, I like to do things backwards.
Yeah, not bad. So tell me, when you messaged, you said you like the idea of being a flaneur around Paris. And this is something we touched on in the show before. What's your definition of it? And then tell us a little bit about how your flaneuring has been going in this city.
Okay, so all I know about the flaneur is what I've read in that book I was telling you about by John Baxter.
John Baxter.
And I guess looking it up online. The flaneur is somebody who just walks around Paris, or anywhere, I suppose, and observes and gets inspired and appreciates what they're seeing and what they're experiencing as they're experiencing it.
So what I love about the word and what we love on this show is it's, for me anyway, it's untranslatable. That's one word, and it took you, 25 words to explain it.
Right.
We don't have a word that even matches it in it. I mean,
I don't think so.
like, what could you even come close? Like, it's sort of drifting aimlessly, but...
Yeah, and I think that's why it has a negative connotation outside of Paris, because what would translate to it is like loafer or, vagabond or something like that.
Right. Tell me about the flaneuring. What I really like from following you on Instagram is that you've, as a fan of the show, you followed Corey Frye.
Yeah.
Corey Frye's tips for the arrondissement.
Yep.
And you've been doing it over, you're doing one a day.
At least one a day.
Okay. How's it going?
It's going really well. There's a couple of places that I've deviated from Corey's suggestions, which were all great suggestions.
Right.
But I've tried to stay clear of like going to restaurants.
Right.
I've tried to see a lot more churches, a few of the like out of the way parks.
Sure.
Yeah.
And it's much easier to do one arrondissement, one district a day, rather than what James and I tried to do 20 in 5 hours, which was impossible.
Yeah, that sounded like it was going to be pretty.
It was never gonna work. So give us a highlight then. What was the best thing that you saw?
The thing that I've liked the most so far has been the Church Saint Sulpice. It's really pretty in there. A lot of really great stained glass, a lot of great paintings. There's a great Joan of Arc statue that I really liked.
Free to get in as well.
Free to get in, free to
Nice.
walk all around.
Double bonus. Okay, back to this idea of flaneur. You said John Baxter, who's actually going to be in an upcoming episode.
That's great news.
Yeah. What do you remember about his definition of it?
Well,
or even better, if you could ask a question that we could ask him when he comes in the studio about flaneuring, what would that be?
Oh man, that's difficult. He didn't really define it. He wrote a whole chapter about how the French perceive it, but mainly he just differentiated between the English interpretation of it and the French, specifically Parisian.
So what would be your question for him? We will ask it to him.
Oh man, put me on the spot with.
That's the whole point of this show, man.
I don't really know what I would ask him specifically. He has a really great story about meeting Federico Fellini while he was writing like a biography about him, and just the way that came together. It just sounded like if you don't believe in fate, like you gotta listen to the story, and it'll make you believe in fate.
Right.
Yeah,
That's
it's
not really
interesting.
Colby. That's not really a question
it's
for
not
John
what you
Baxter.
asked for, but I'd ask him. I'd ask him if he believed in fate.
Cool. And what is it about his writing that you like? We may as well talk him up.
So John Baxter has a really great way of expounding on a subject that doesn't really go on tangents or down rabbit trails or anything, but he has a great way of expounding a subject like in a raconteur kind of way, just like using 30 words when 3 will do, but in a way that you're riveted and you're really interested.
He's a storyteller. I've read a couple of his books.
Storyteller.
Well, I got a surprise for you.
What's that?
He's actually coming into the studio right now.
He's not.
He is. He's downstairs waiting probably right now.
That's crazy, man.
So your question that we were saving for when he comes in, you're going to ask it to him yourself.
All right.
But I think you can have a bit of time to plan it while I go get him, and we'll put the audience on a little bit of a break, and we'll be back in a second.
Oliver, that's awesome.
Okay, well, there you go. There's the surprise. John Baxter has just walked into the studio.
Wonderful surprise.
Colby, you were just saying you had a question for him. Ask away.
John, tell us more about the flaneur.
The flaneur, yes, interesting institution, exclusively Parisian, I think. Dates from about 1845. So it precedes Haussmann's rebuilding of Paris. But, of course, the rebuilding of Paris and the widening of the sidewalks is really what gave the flaneur a sort of boot. And suddenly people who hadn't dared go out for fear of stepping into mud and horse excrement and so on. Merde, exactly. Could now go out in their best clothes and take their wives and children out if they wanted. And, of course, the cafes began to appear to serve the new passing trade. So suddenly you've got usually men walking around looking for something to do, going into a cafe, sitting there, watching people go by, getting into conversations, and this idea of people who didn't do anything in particular, just walked and hung out, just simply for the pleasure of it. It really took root, and it's the whole basis of what we now think of as boulevardier, theatre, boulevard literature, poetry, journalism. It's the start of Maupassant, people like that writing about the slightly trashy modern people, who lived in the different central arrondissement in the old houses that had been turned into rooming houses. So the flaneur is really the emblem of that whole post-Haussmannian Paris. It's an acquired taste.
Well, that's what this show is all about, is figuring out France and especially Paris. So I'm glad that you cleared that one up for me. But I was thinking to hand over the mic to you for a sec, Colby. You've been working through, you're at about 12, 13 arrondissements into your...
Today's 13.
You're at 13, so you've got probably one of the best people in the whole city to ask for tips over your next 7 days of arrondissements. There you go.
John, what would you look for in the 13th?
Oh gosh, in the 13th.
Is that today? So this is for you after the show, you're
This
thinking?
is my evening stroll.
Well, I really think the Gare de l'Est is extraordinary because of
Hang on, the Gare de l'Est is in the 13th,
No,
is it?
sorry,
Lyon, Gare de Lyon.
Gare de Lyon, Gare de Lyon, yes. The Gare de Lyon, of course, you've got the Tram Bleu.
Oh yeah, the
Which is just
restaurant.
one of the most extraordinary things. It used to be the dining room of the old Gare de Lyon, and they were going to tear it down, and they decided no, we'll refurbish it, and the whole place is decorated up in Art Nouveau style with the most extraordinary murals and canvases of all the more glamorous destinations you can reach from there. And it was because it was named the Tram Bleu because the blue train, the Tram Bleu, was the all first class overnight express from Calais to Monaco and then on to Benidorm. And it was very expensive. And of course, all the big names used to travel on it. So, and they used to hang out in the cabaret, not the cabaret, I forget the word anyway. You
Caboose.
know, no, in the actual beforehand, they'd go and have a glass of
see,
champagne in the restaurant, basically, and then join the train and so on. So you can really recapture something of the great days of steam, I think.
When you're saying all this, I'm thinking dollar signs. This is expensive.
Well, no, the Tram Bleu itself isn't expensive. The restaurant, no, you can eat quite modestly there.
Can you just pop in as a tourist and have a look around?
Yes, there is a bar next to it where you can just have coffee and things like that. No, it's so big that you never fill it. You know, it's a barn of a place. But in terms of decoration, it's extraordinary, the whole mythology of the Tram Bleu and so. Well, okay, if you know Arpège, the best restaurant in Paris and the most expensive.
I can tell you now, I've never eaten in that.
Never eaten in Arpège. It's only 500 euros for lunch.
You sound
It's
surprised.
nothing. But
I don't even go close to it in case I accidentally buy an entree or something.
But the walls of Arpège, the lighting comes from these beautiful René Lalique glass sconces, which were souvenired from one of the carriages of the old Orient Express.
Wow.
Which used to go from there. Just to go up there and to sit in that place, you just. It's inexhaustible, really.
That's a dinner for you, Colby, tonight.
Yeah,
That sounds
absolutely.
great.
Go and grab an arpège.
Yeah, and I don't know whether you know Luc Besson's film Nikita.
Luc Besson.
Okay, well, in that, he takes who is it? I forget the girl's name. Anyway, the trainee killer takes her there for her birthday.
Hang on, which film is this?
Nikita. It's the Luc Besson version. There's an American version with Bridget Fonda, but the girl who appears in the French version, it's the same story. Anyway,
I'm thinking of what's the Leon or the professional? Is that the same?
Natalie
Yeah,
Portman. This is the same director.
Same director, but not the same film.
Okay.
Nikita is a sort of street girl that they decide to train as an assassin.
Okay.
Anyway, he takes her there, takes her to the Tram Bleu as her birthday treat, and there's a beautiful gift with ribbon on it, and he says, and she opens it up, and it contains a pistol, and he says, "I'm leaving you here. You've got to kill the 3 people in the booth next door and get away clean."
Wow.
So it has those sort of showbiz associations. So I would say yes, the Tram Bleu is definitely the thing to
Just
see.
don't eat at a table next to Luc Besson.
Wow.
Well, yeah, exactly. Very wise. Yes. Yes.
Was it the Arpège restaurant that was in the start of your new book?
Yes, that's right. Yes,
Right.
in the beginning of Eating Eternity, a story told me
Little
by
vignette. I love that. That was great.
Me too. It was a gift. I was showing some people around Paris, and one of them she's a former journalist with Gourmet magazine, and she told me this story about how a group of these food writers arranged to have the tasting menu, the menu de dégustation at Arpège, and they all arrived arrived in the group and sat down, and they were fiddling around and getting themselves settled. And the menu de degustation is, I think, 7 dishes served consecutively. And so the first dish was served and they ate it, but they were chatting and everything. And then the dishes were taken away, and a little while later more dishes arrived, and they looked, and one of them said, "Didn't we just eat this?" Right. And they looked and said, "Yes, this is the first course again. We've eaten this." So they call the waiter and they say, "No, we've had this already." And he said, "I'll just go and talk to chef." So he goes down and talked to Alan Passard, the great chef. And came back and she said, "Yeah, no, the chef says this is correct. When you ate the first course before, you weren't paying attention." So you have to do it over.
Oh, wow. That is a lovely book as well. I mean, even just visually, it's nice.
I'm very lucky. That publisher, Museon, they're a small publisher in New York, but they specialize in books for museum shops and things like that.
Right.
So they have deals with a lot of the big galleries. So they are able to reproduce old masters and so on. So yeah, very.
So
very
there's
lucky.
color pictures. It's kind of glossy pages. It's not your typical. I mean, same with the book about Montmartre, your other recent one. Also, it's handy having those pictures in when you mention so many of the old paintings or the buildings to just see them there. But where can people buy these books?
Well, they're all any good bookshop, as they say.
Yeah.
Here in Paris, Shakespeare and Company, of course, and all the English language bookshops stock them. They're all available, of course, Amazon. Dear readers, if you buy it from Amazon, please enter a review, if you would. HarperCollins, the big outfit, they're distributed everywhere. Museon less so. But I've noticed, in the museum shops and so on like that, as well as, of course, Shakespeare and Company and the other English language shops.
You've just, while our listeners are typing away reviews to your books, I'm going to urge them as well to type away a review for the Earful Tower radio show. So we'll just give them a second to do that because it helps us as well. These reviews, people don't realize, but they actually help other people find their books and their radio shows. So everyone just do that quickly.
We'll wait.
Okay, thanks guys. I think we've already been talking for quite a while. So what I'm going to do is how we finish every interview on this show, and it's a quick fire round, which means, and with the help of you,
All right.
we're both going to ask you, I haven't told you to prepare anything, Colby, but we're going to ask you quick questions, and you just got to say the first thing that comes to your mind, okay? And so this doubles as a quick fire for you, Colby, because you haven't prepared anything. But we're just going to ask you questions. And mine is favorite literary tour to give. Who is it about?
Oh, it would have to be about Hemingway, I think, because Hemingway is just the golden standard here. And fortunately, I live in the building where Sylvia Beach used to live when she ran Shakespeare and Company, and where Hemingway used to visit. So I have a real sense that he's a kind of neighbour of mine.
Wow, where is that?
Rue de l'Odeon in the 6th.
Wow, that's cool. So that book was probably, that address was mentioned in Movable Feast and all that, right?
Oh, yes. Yeah. That was, he used to, she lived there with Adrienne Monnier, her companion, and that was at number 18. Number 12 was where the shop was.
It wasn't a coincidence that you ended up in that house?
It was a coincidence.
Really?
No, absolutely. When I moved here to be with my now wife, I didn't know the significance, and she didn't know, and she'd lived in that building herself as a child for years, and no one. I mean, she was Sylvia Beach was American. You know what the French are like. I mean, they chauvinism was a French invention. In fact, that one of the real revelations to me was meeting a lady who lived on the first floor, who when I arrived, who was in her 80s, and when I got to know her, I asked her if she remembered Sylvia Beach. And she said, oh, sort of, but I was only a little girl when she was here. And I said, so you wouldn't remember Hemingway? She said, oh, yes, Hemingway, I remember, because he came back in 1944, and by then I was like a teenager, and so I remember him arriving.
Right.
And I said, oh, so he came in with a machine gun, and Adrian Monnier came down, and she said, oh, well, that's not how I remember it at all. She gave me a completely different version
Wow.
of that story in Movable Feast. And from that's planted the seed of skepticism about Movable Feast. And since then, I've gone back through it and pretty well debunked almost all of it.
What happened to Print the Legend?
Well, it is the legend. That's what he did. He printed the
Oh,
legend.
he did it, but then
the truth was, I actually knew in London years ago Donald Ogden Stewart, who was the man who introduced Hemingway to Fitzgerald. And he told me things about this. And when I read Movable Feast, I thought, this doesn't seem to square with what he told me. When I looked into it a bit, even just by reading the letters of Hemingway, you know that it's a complete fabrication. He was writing all this 30 years later, after he'd gone through all these terrible traumas, so his memory was pretty well shot. And he actually had to ring up Hadley in Paris to get her to refresh his memory about certain things. So, it's as much fiction as a farewell to arms.
Wow. I've got to say, because you're so interesting, John, I've allowed you to talk on in the quickfire round, but for the next 4 questions, that's not happening. Over to you, Colby.
All right, John, you're sitting at home and you're a great cook. So if your wife's out of town, there's nobody at the house but you, and you're not really motivated to go out and do anything, you just want to cook something quick and eat it during a slow point in the movie, what are you making?
Croque monsieur.
Croque monsieur. I love the croque monsieur.
I get a feeling that there wouldn't be... Are there slow points in movies for you? If you're a film buff, you're not leaving, you're not walking out of the room to make a croque monsieur.
No, but you in the commercial breaks. Commercial breaks in movies on French television are very long.
Right.
I mean, they're not just a chance to go to the WC. It's a chance to go there, make a phone call to your girlfriend. Sort of whip up a batch of pancakes and so on. So no, I could, if challenged, I think I could make a croque
That's
monsieur.
something if you ever come back on the show, we're going to put you on the spot. Okay, next question. You brought up Hemingway. Where, and Hemingway was hanging around on the left bank a lot. Where are the Hemingways of today hanging out?
Well, the short answer is they're not in Paris. They're sort of in Clermont-Ferrand or somewhere
Really?
like that. Well, who can live in Paris? If you're a writer, you can't live in Paris as a writer. It costs a fortune. It costs you 1,000, 1,200 euros a month in rent. Plus, who has that kind of money?
Nobody does.
People ask me that question a lot.
Oh, that doesn't make me feel any good about my question now. Do you always say Clermont-Ferrand as well?
Well, sort of, yes.
What a useless
Sometimes
question.
I say Sergi Pontoise, but if I'm feeling more genial. But the truth is that no one can live in Paris or almost any European city now and be a writer.
Yeah.
It can be your hobby, but...
Sure. Okay, 2 more questions before we wrap this up.
What kind of walking shoes do you recommend for...
Walking
all
shoes.
over Paris. The streets are much different. There's
Well, they are. Yes, in fact, this is something somebody says. A guy asked Steven Spielberg what was the best piece of advice he could give him about being a director. He said, wear comfortable shoes. I buy cheap shoes online. They're like these ones. They have a very thick sole. You're quite right. The streets are so uneven. You don't want anything that kind of comes up through.
Leave the high
sole.
heels at home.
Absolutely, definitely. Great. Also, I don't like sneakers. I don't like the flat sole. I think you need a really heavily cleated, rubberized kind of a sole to really grip. And I wear thick socks as well, because they really can be uncomfortable.
Okay, good answer. Last question. I was thinking about it, then I got thinking about shoes. But what was it? No, I had a really good one. Oh, yeah. What I want to always ask people, what is your secret of Paris that you'd like to show tourists who are here or visiting family or friends?
I invite them up to our apartment. I take them out on the terrace.
No, but our listeners can't come into your apartment.
My walks always end with an invitation to have lunch or an aperitif in our apartment.
Well, that's a great segue to get some of the listeners to book some of your tours, and I hope they do. And I look forward to doing one of your tours myself.
I'd be more than happy.
Well, thank you, John Baxter, for coming in. Thank you, Colby Fox, for co-hosting with me.
It was my great pleasure.
And we'll be reading your books.
Well, I'm very glad to be here on Earful Tower radio, and I'll be spreading the word to everybody I meet.
You're very kind, John. Thanks very much for coming in. Wow, that was a fun episode, James, I think. But There's still more left. There's time for a story from Corey. You let him in? Corey!
Hey, and he's on time.
Did you see him in the stairs?
I did, yeah. I passed John Baxter.
Oh, wow.
Great guy. I'm a big fan of his,
Take a seat.
So, as usual, we do a story with Corey Frye, the tour guide, at the end. And what have you got for us this week? I mean, are you out of breath or are you all right? Can we go?
No, I'm all right. Yeah,
Okay.
I'm good.
Do you want water?
Yeah, thanks.
I'll pour it in. I did the sound. That was real. Come on, then. Let's hear the story.
This idea of being a flaneur, which John Baxter is so good at describing, I thought we'd go back to the 17th century where there was a time in Paris where being a flaneur could get you killed.
What?
There's a lot of these weird stories when we go back in time, eh?
Absolutely.
You've got a sense of the dark side of Paris.
Well,
how can you get killed for being a flaneur?
How are we going to
you
find
could
out
not
about
only
these
get
things
killed, you
otherwise?
could get murdered, flat out murdered for being a flaneur. In the 1680s. Let me describe, because there was a serial killer. You know Jack the Ripper, of course, up in London. Well, Paris has its own serial killer.
Jacques le Ripper.
Exactly, yeah. So what happened was, it's 1684, and young gentlemen who were walking at night, noblemen and whatnot, and wealthy folks, they would be strolling the parks of Luxembourg and the Tuileries Gardens, and all of a sudden they started to go missing.
Were the parks open at night in those days?
They were, yeah.
Oh, okay.
And it was a popular promenade for the wealthy. And so they're roaming around, these guys alone in the middle of the night, and they started to get picked off one by one. They vanished. And a dozen went missing, 24 went missing, and all of a sudden 26 young noblemen had vanished from the streets of Paris in the middle of
James,
the
you
night.
look really worried.
So don't
this
worry
was
about it.
1684,
Yeah.
man.
This is why they've
That's a long
closed the
time
parks
ago.
off now
Yeah,
at night.
right, maybe.
So what happened was Louis XIV at the time tells the police lieutenant, the chief here in Paris, you got to do something. You got to find this serial killer. So what he does, the chief, he finds a guy who has a son. One of the policemen has a son. And they take the son, who's about the same age as the victims. They dress him up as a nobleman, stuff his pockets full of money, put some fancy jewelry on his fingers, and they push him out onto the streets at night, and they say, roam around.
A fake nobleman. A fobleman.
A fobleman, and he's the
Faux.
bait. So he walks around night after night, nothing happens. But on the 5th night, he's walking through the Tuileries Gardens, and he comes across this beautiful princess. Beautiful woman. He's never seen anything like her. And she claims that she's a princess from Eastern Europe, Polish, I believe.
But was
And
she?
so she says to him, come meet me tonight in my apartment.
In
and
French.
he's thinking, wow, exactly.
Like a Bond villain. Like the girls, the Russian.
Right.
Yeah.
They kill you with their beauty.
Yeah. Or they
And so-
strangle you with their thighs. I watched one recently.
Let's not bring your own personal fetishes into this place, but
So we're in the Tuileries.
in the Tuileries. And she says, come meet me later on this evening. So he does. He meets her late at night behind the Louvre, and she takes him to, now pay attention to the name of the street because you can still go here to where the event would take place. It's called Rue Courtalon, and it's number 2 Rue Courtalon.
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 In the second arrondissement. First.
I believe it's in the
Yes.
first. And so listen, he goes up into her apartment. Everything seems fine. But he tells his dad, the policeman, you should be waiting just in case, right?
Yeah.
So they're waiting, lurking in the
Flicks
shadows.
him a
so
quick
that-
SMS.
Yeah, exactly. So he goes in, and she's being all nice to him, and he's seducing him, and he's like, I can't believe my luck.
Hang on. Do we assume that he's in on it, or is he thinking that he's just met a princess and he's okay?
Well, he's not sure.
Okay.
I mean, the police are there, so they know that this might be a sting operation, but they got to catch her red-handed. So she goes out and leaves the room for some drinks. He's frantically looking around, looking for evidence of these 26 victims. He looks behind a partition, right, and he finds a big armoire, opens up the armoire, and he finds 26
Heads.
severed, embalmed heads of all the previous victims on silver dishes laid out.
What?
So he screams out. His dad and the rest of the police bust in through the window, and they capture not only the princess, who's the killer, but her 4 big burly henchmen who were doing the killing.
The head collectors.
Yeah,
And why,
exactly.
why were they collecting
Well,
heads?
this is what happened. They ended up sentencing them all to death, and the 4 henchmen were killed, and she was thrown in the Bastille. What happened was she was seducing these guys, having their heads chopped off. And she wasn't sadistic or freaky, although I guess she was. But she was selling those heads on the black market.
Oh,
Because back when you were...
Who would want to?
Well, that to the...
hang on, you know what? She hadn't sold many because 26 were in the armoire.
They were still there. Yeah.
The ans-
Maybe
the
she was
answer to
waiting
that
for the value to rise.
It was the Germans, actually, on the German black market. If you were a doctor or a medical student, it was very hard to get a hold of cadavers to study, to
Yeah.
practice on.
Let alone noble cadavers.
Oh, yeah, man, that's a whole other...
Still,
echelon.
it's still hard to get them.
I know you try.
On
I
the
know you
dark
try your
web.
best.
You know where to go.
So to wrap up the story, she was selling those heads to these doctors so that they could study them. Now, her name was Lady Guilford, apparently. She was not a Polish princess. Turns out she was part of an English family, very well-to-do English family. So she is in the Bastille, manages to escape, and no one heard from her after.
She got away with 26
So
crimes.
that she goes down. You know, we have Jack the Ripper. You call her Jill the Ripper, perhaps,
Yeah.
in Paris?
And what was the name of the street? What's the relevance?
Well, that was where she took him. The
what
Rue
happens.
Courtalon.
Oh, I thought it was going to come back in the story.
The Rue Courtalon is number 2 of the Rue Courtalon is where she took him upstairs.
Where can we find this street?
You can find that street in the first arrondissement.
Sounds like the first. Sounds like the kind of thing that would go on in the first arrondissement.
It's in the Les Halles area. So you can go there and look up on the second floor in American. I guess in France it's the first floor.
Yes.
Up in the windows there, and that's where it all took place.
Wow, that's another great story from Corey. I like that
Are you
one.
gonna check that one out, Ollie?
I'm definitely going to check it out. Post
Yeah?
a picture
At
as
night?
usual.
At
yeah.
night?
Not at night.
I might go for a walk in the Tuileries and see if someone's still around.
I'm going to be in the bushes with a Polish accent.
Hold on, I would love to dress up James in a nobleman costume, and we'll do the whole.
Maybe we can do that on
Maybe
the
we
next
can catch the
episode.
killer.
Well,
Yeah.
thank you for bringing the story as usual, Corey. If you want to hear the full story and see the full thing, you should go on a tour with him. French Fry in Paris.
French Fry in Paris.
I'll give you a tip. Mention the Earful Tower. He'll give you VIP treatment. What does that mean? I don't know. Just
Even I don't know, but we'll figure it out when you get there.
mention it, though. We like to know when we've sent people towards him. And well, thanks for that. Next week, we've got another fun and happening show, James.
What we got next week?
We have got, I think, Lindsay Tremuda.
You think?
Yeah, she's coming.
she's
She's
great.
coming back on.
So she's going to come in and she's going to recommend restaurants on the right bank and a whole lot more.
Only on the right.
Only on the right. But we'll do left at another point.
Only for Ollie-minded people.
Thanks for listening, everybody. We'll see you next week.
Earful Tower with Oliver G.